Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who every Thursday has what is called Thunderground Thursday, in which I review a band which is either unsigned or unknown to me before every Friday when I scroll through the list of new releases on Tidal. If there's some band I've never heard of, they qualify. So there's a lot of bands that qualify for Thunderground Thursday, and it's hard for me to always choose. Sometimes the choice starts off as something somewhat superficial, as is the case this week with Ritt Momney and their album Sunnyboy. I mainly really gave this band an extra chance. I really wanted to review this band because I think it is one of the best rock and roll band names I have heard in a very long time. Ritt Momney. Now I'm going to give you two reasons why it's such a great name, at least to me. Number one is I have a lot of bizarrely personal stories about interacting with Mitt Romney himself. I want an excuse to talk about them, and this is going to give me that excuse. All the way throughout this video, I'll be peppering in my Mitt Romney stories, culminating at the very end with how Mitt Romney is indirectly responsible for this very channel. But the second reason I think is more interesting. With a name like Ritt Momney, and the fact that they're from Salt Lake City, it adds an extra dimension to them that I find quite interesting. I'm fascinated by cities which are so dominated by one industry, okay? I'm fascinated by Orlando, where if you don't work for Disney, you sort of have to say it. Or Los Angeles, if you don't work in Hollywood, you have to say it. And Salt Lake City is dominated by the industry of the Mormon Church. So having this name, Ritt Momney, which is a play on the most famous Mormon, I suppose, of all time, the almost president Mitt Romney, the former governor Mitt Romney, to have this play on the name, it has such a punch to it. It just comes through. And the feelings that I get, I've spent some time in Salt Lake City, the feelings that I get of being in that city and the oppression of that environment if you are not in that industry. I'm not saying anything bad about any particular faith, but whenever you are in a city that is dominated by an industry, the feeling that you have of just not being able to get away from it. So this playful, yet insightful, and also just very pleasing on a word level, I enjoy wordplay like this, makes this band name the best band name I've heard in a long time. It's also a very college band name, and one thing that I like about Ritt Momney is it reminds me of when I was in college in the 90s, when there were always new and good guitar-based, piano-based rock bands coming up out of all places all over the country. I'm not going to Generation X OK Boomer you and tell you rock and roll is dead and in my day, but to a certain extent, rock and roll is dead and in my day, this used to be a lot more common of a thing. I do teach at a college, although I don't represent them. I do teach at a college, and there hasn't been a major college band at that college for the 10 years I've been there. This is true in most colleges these days. There aren't really these college bands. And I think that the kind of indie, pop, underground, college rock band scene really needs more support. I talk a lot on this channel about Hippocampus, who Ritt Momney and Hippocampus, at least to me, occupy a very similar space. I think Hippocampus should be platinum. They should be multi-millionaires. I assume they're able to make a living off of their success. But a band that good, it is somewhat painful that that's not the way the environment is. So a band like Ritt Momney, I think, needs a lot more of a push. And hopefully the several hundred views that this video will get, based on the historical nature of Thunderground Thursday, will help them. It is tempting to compare Ritt Momney and Mitt Romney, to say that maybe if you were to take a negative approach towards this band, that like Mitt Romney, they're lacking a certain edge, they're maybe a little too milquetoasty, a little too stuffed shirt white guy. I don't think that they are. I think that it's possible to hear them and dismiss them like that, but when you actually listen, it is such a good band, in particular the layering that they do in their production. I think the people often cite hip-hop as the reason why indie rock is in such a poor state. I don't think so. I think it's computers. I just think that when people can make music alone in their room and can have bedroom pop, and it can be just as good, if not better, as as Pavement or whatever it was that I was listening to when I was their age. I think that's done a lot. And this album is a great example of how we can merge those things together, how we can have an album which at times feels like a bedroom pop album with a very convincing lead singer who appears to be controlling everything, appears to be doing almost everything, sort of Tame Impala levels of control. But it doesn't quite have that insular feeling of bedroom pop. The problem with bedroom pop is that you always feel like you're in the bedroom with the person. Here, for this album, I feel like I'm in a club or a coffee house and I'm watching someone play an album. It does a thing which I really enjoy when albums are short. Just, I review every song. I don't have that much time in my day, and especially with all these rap albums that have been coming out, they're like an hour and a half. It's like, God, just take it easy, would you? Not everything has to be Dune. It's a little over a half an hour, but it's packed. Like every song is very rich and very dense. So it has the benefits of a long album with the benefits of a short album. Emotionally, it primarily stays in this register of emotional regret, kind of a thoughtful, dour reflection, childhood lost, innocence lost. Bizarrely, I think they just signed to a major label pretty recently. At least that's the sense I would get based on the lyrics. Maybe it's been longer than recently. But there's a feeling of like there is a righteous poverty that they have now escaped, which, knowing how it goes for rock and roll bands on major labels, hey, Ritt Momney, I wouldn't worry about having too much money, because I don't think you're going to get the support that you need from the major labels to be able to live like a rock star, even if you somehow become a rock star. Lyrically, I find it interesting that they play a lot with cliches, but they do it very well. I often talk about how I love Radiohead is one of my favorite bands, but lyrically they can often frustrate me as just feeling like a series of cliches or often said sentences with a slight twist. Ritt Momney does a lot of that, but I think they actually do it better than Tom York. So you can at me with that. I'm going to go through the album song by song. Yes, subscribe to my channel, please. I've been getting a lot of subscriptions lately, and it's awesome. I really appreciate it. I want more. Give me all the subscriptions. Smash all the like buckets. Don't do the notification thing, though. That's too intrusive. I mean, I guess you can if you want. I release 3 videos a week, 3 to 4. So I'm basically always here. You don't need notifications. But I do like the likes and the comments. So the intro, first of all, this album is an album. I enjoy albums that have a cohesive feeling. They don't feel like a collection of singles. And this intro does what a good intro does, which is it settles you into the album. It announces the atmosphere, it announces some of the themes, it sets the tone, and then it leads directly into the rest of the album. As this piano-led intro goes, towards the back we hear these guitar notes being played. One of the things I enjoy about this could be as a child of the 90s or a young man of the 90s, I love guitar chords that are, 2 chords, 2 fingers, 2 notes. So if I have no idea if this guitar's in tune, by the way. Let's see. So if a G is normally, then like the sort of the scrubbed chord, the kind of 90s indie chord would just be the top 2 notes. And so the guitar work on this album, for the most part, is right in those 2 notes range, not really in the full explosive chord. And I like that because it goes between a couple note chords to just single notes. And as these notes come in, it leads directly into the first song. This song is going to be my stamp, my example of the album. I really suggest you listen to it. This is a very good album. I really enjoy this. I'm going to include a link to it up there. This is the deal. You go up there, you watch the song, and then you come back and finish the video. Or you go and you don't come back because you just listen to the whole album and you forget about me. When you remember, come back and just leave a comment, okay? You don't have to finish the video if you don't want, but I'd like some engagement here. The opening song, the title track, Sunnyboy. When you listen to this song, listen to his great clear voice, great rock and roll that is like both indie and pop at the same time, great lyrics in the pre-chorus, sorry kid, I sold off the sunlight, had to sell it to pay the rent. It feels as though he could be talking literally about his youth and represented by the sun, and his father or mother or someone who's responsible for him having to sell off that joy in order to pay for the rent. Or we could see it as a more generational thing of the older generation selling off the safety, selling off the sun, selling off nature in order to pay the rent. Global warming comment, I'm not sure quite which, leads into this great chorus with Sunnyboy, Where'd You Go? The image on the cover of the album is a sun, but it's a sun with like a not really a frown, but kind of like a neutral expression. And it's funny because if you've had kids like I have, you can't stop kids from drawing suns with smiles on them. Like, you just can't. To the point where if a kid comes home with a drawing and the sun has a frowny face, you got to call the school counselor. That's a red flag. That's a red flag, Johnny. You can't. So there is a real dissonance here. It's all tied into this larger theme of innocence lost. A lot of the lyrics on this are about remembering when he had wild hair and when he had dirty feet. So the chorus is great, and the first verse is great. We have a lot of this great layering. And then the chorus is very catchy, does some of the most interesting drum work on the album. I wish there was more drum work on the album, my biggest complaint about it. And then the second verse, it switches from guitar to piano, and all these instruments kind of go in and out, and if you just listen, you maybe don't hear it, but if you listen carefully, then you hear it. Stuck inside my phone, I'm hardly free, he doesn't have dirty feet, this real sense about this loss of innocence and of childhood. And then as it ends with him singing Woke Up This Morning over and over again in a sort of bridge outro. And I like this. I guess it can't be a bridge and an outro. It has to be one or the other, Skye. It's an outro. And I like it because it's that sense of woke up this morning is one of these generalities, one of these banalities that people use all the time, but it doesn't go anywhere. And it has a certain strength to it, right? That certain unresolved strength. Woke up this morning, woke up this morning. And the outro is great. It has almost like a 90s style guitar solo. And then at a certain, by that I mean just sort of like not much, just a couple notes, very minimalist, very Neil Young inspired. And then at the very end, like the bass gets jacked up and has this great sound, and it feels like there might be a whole new song hopping in here, but then it ends. Mitt Romney moment. How do I know Mitt Romney? Well, I grew up in a town called Belmont, Massachusetts, voted by the Boston Globe as the most boring town in Massachusetts. And the Romneys moved to Massachusetts. And before I met him in his house, which I will tell you about later, I have a friend who now currently works at the New Yorker, and he was in the LDS, he was a Mormon, and he was friends with Mitt Romney's son. I'm not going to name the son, but there you go. And the son was, they were friends, and so he said, hey, Skye, do you want to go see my dad's office? It's a real political office. And I'd never heard of Mitt Romney. I was like, I don't know who Mitt Romney is. I'm like, okay, sure, yeah, let's go. And it was in this place, this weird place in Fresh Pond, which is in Cambridge, this Rotary. And it was on the second floor. And on the first floor is the place where I used to go and buy scalped tickets. There was a guy who'd sell tickets. He sold me tickets to see Sting at Great Woods, the Fields of Gold tour. I bought tickets to see Smashing Pumpkins at the Paradise Club, but Billy Corgan had a sore throat. So the next time I saw him, I had to see him at a freaking hockey arena. And so I buy Grateful Dead tickets from this guy. So it's really funny because I'm like, okay, I'm here in this place, and I'm used to going to this place to buy tickets from the scalper. And then I go up to the second floor, and I meet this guy, and he looks like Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney looks like Mitt Romney, just like central casting of like white politician dude, with the hair and the smile, perfectly friendly. And he told me that he was running against Ted Kennedy. And I remember thinking this exact thought. This man is an idiot. You don't run against Ted Kennedy in Massachusetts. You'll never amount to anything. That was the first time I met Mitt Romney. Let's get back to Ritt Momney, who someday, maybe I'll meet Ritt Momney. The next song is called Sometime, and that's with Shane T. When I reviewed this, I was like, Shane T, why is that kind of anonymous name? Like, why does that remind me of something? I reviewed Shane T a couple years ago. I really liked his album. I didn't call it Thunderground Thursday back then, but you should really check out Shane T's album. It's quite good. He has this really beautiful voice, very nice high angelic voice that comes in the chorus. Lots of layers of guitar, perfect kind of college rock here. Some interesting lyrics. There's a world outside of me, no more wasting my time. I'm going to take some time for me. So I like the idea of no more wasting my time. I'm going to take time for me. Another minimalist guitar solo. I really enjoy these minimalist guitar solos. With guitar taking such a back seat so often in music, it's nice to have people just play it even though they're not virtuoso. Not Around is where I knew that I had to review this album. So I like those first 3 tracks, but Not Around has this great variation. It's kind of a left turn from the rest of the album. It's an acoustic guitar-led song, joined eventually by a lot more instrumentation. At times, the instrumentation is Brian Wilson-esque. I mean, it's very interesting, lots of different discrete sounds that come in and come out. And it's this beautiful, sad love story. This like sort of like disaffected, sour, sweet love story about picking up this woman from an airport. And then the next line is about how I said something to her and she shot down the idea like a plane. Beautiful. The first indication that he's uncomfortable with the money that he's now making as a major label singer. It says, it was silly for me to be paid just to sing, and I sang for you, but it was not the same as the first time I sang for you. And they talk about bright eyes and just this whole very involved story. And I feel in the story, I feel like I don't even know this guy's name, okay? I'm gonna do the Leonard Skinner thing, and in my mind, this guy's name is Ritt Momney. You can put in the comments if you know his actual name. It doesn't matter, right? So, I mean, I guess it matters to him, his passport. So I get the sense that I'm in the car with them in the airport, and then I can see this awkward desire that is not being met, this unsatisfied relationship. Just great sweet feel though. There's this almost Weezer style play with dynamics, almost a Weezer style guitar, very Weezer-ish, although they blare this guitar solo into harmonica. And that's a really nice effect here. Everything sounds kind of blown out. And then eventually everything settles into almost like a 1950s style, kind of that box style chords with a nice sweeping sound. So the combination of Not Around and Sunnyboy, you listen to those together, you realize Ritt Momney is up to some very good stuff. Set the Table is another very kind of poppy single note song. These guitar layers, kind of odd auto tunes, kind of electric, a little bit more of an electric sound, right? A little bit more modern, I suppose, where it sounds a lot more like the way musicians now are very conscious to mix together computer elements and acoustic elements, and that's in here. Good lyrics, the best things, the worst things always happen after midnight, that's mostly why I'm there. A lot of lyrics about not trying to get better. And another good example of flipping around cliches. Every time I set the table, I flip it over. I think that's quite nice. Someone named Claude, who I don't know, has her own verse. It's quite nice, more fun plays with the cliche. And then as it sort of ends, the arpeggiated keyboard kind of goes up and it gets a lot more intense. Now for the next Romney story, I forgot something. I'm just gonna go over. Sorry for the edit. I had to find this. This is a crucial part of my Mitt Romney story, as you will find out. I had it in my CD collection, and my CD collection's completely out of alphabetical order. Thousands of CDs out of order. So, what is this CD and what does this have to do with me and Mitt Romney? Well, I went over to his house once with my friend who now works at the New Yorker and with his son, with Mitt Romney's son. And he's very nice, a very big house. It's interesting because we lived in not quite the same neighborhood, but pretty close. And we were the only 2 houses anywhere in the neighborhood that never mowed their lawn. This is a really weird, I know why my family didn't, but it's a little bit odd that someone as prim and proper as Mitt Romney wouldn't mow his lawn. This will come to factor in pretty severely in a future story. But that's him moving into the town. And I remember seeing his maids and people who worked for him. It turns out they were there illegally, which is part of the reason why he didn't win the election. And I was in a band at the time, a band which was named Irving, not a good name for a band. But nevertheless, my friend asked me if he would come up with a name for his band. So my friend was in a band with Mitt Romney's son. Not knowing how funny it would eventually be, I named them Milhouse. So Milhouse was after the Simpsons character, but it was also after Richard Nixon's middle name. I didn't know that I was naming the band of a potential future president, naming his son's band after Nixon's middle name. That wasn't some kind of intentional thing. This was so close to being a very valuable object of presidential curiosity history. But there you go. So that's how I named Mitt Romney's son's band. Let's get back to the album. Showrunner 99. Interesting, he talks a lot about his fear and his need to memorize and being wasted. The sense of him, you definitely get the sense this is somebody who's in the middle of a breakdown, some kind of breakdown, not feeling great about himself. He talks about driving 3 hours outside of LA. It feels like he's writing after getting his record deal because his Nissan breaks down, and he's able to buy a new one. His voice is very kind of hippocampus-y here, which is a good thing. And it's a very kind of sad song about making it. Is that all there is? He keeps saying. Just is that all there is? Beautiful, kind of harmonizes with himself. These programmed drums are going on behind here. If I could do one thing, I would get them a drummer. Just somebody who can just play rock and roll drums all the way through, as opposed to the programmed sound or the restrained sounding drums. Head Start has got a gentle, beautiful, high voice in the first part. Settles into this sort of Wonderful Christmas Time by Paul McCartney style keyboards, kind of a soul song. This has my favorite lyrics on the album. I'm going to get into them because it shows his ability, his uncanny ability to play with pre-existing sentences and cliches and mix them in with deeper ideas. 'Cause love has got an evil sister named Power. An evil twin sister named Power, who sticks by her side everywhere she goes. So that's an interesting idea, right? Love and power being connected. Later, like a fish that takes the bait just to be taken for a ride. Right, fish taking the bait, the idea that the fish knows it's taking the bait just to take a ride. If you've ever been in a bad relationship, that's what you're doing. You're taking the bait just to be taken for a ride. If there's one thing you've taught me, it's that love is a fight between a bug and a boot. So come on, choose your fighter. If you'll be the moth, I guess I'll be the lighter. So it's a beautiful image of love, a very negative issue of love, in which it's just a question of power. It actually reminds me a lot of Catherine Breillat, the director who directed Romance. If you ever want to see a great psychosexual, hardcore, pornographic at times, French art movie, it's called Romance by Catherine Breillat. Every possible content warning for sexuality is in that movie, but the theme of the movie is that love is stupid. It's a question of power. C'est con l'amour, c'est une question de pouvoir, is what the main character says. This appears to be in that mindset. And then the line, there's more fish in the sea, is what they say. So how are you going to end that? Hey, Ritt Momney, how are you going to end that terrible line? There's more fish in the sea. How are you going to get yourself out of this one? I've already let you get away with the fish that takes the bait. How are you going to get out of this? There's more fish in the sea. Most of which have not hurt me. You did it. You did it. I say cheers to you, Ritt Momney. That is exactly how you end that line. There's more fish in the sea, most of which have not hurt me. A beautiful, well-executed line. Remember how I talked about Mitt Romney not mowing his lawn? Well, one time I went to, they had a house party, and Milhouse was playing. I remember because they did a version of Good Times, Bad Times. That's the opening song, Led Zeppelin song. And I wanted to go. I wanted to leave. I saw most of it, but it was okay. I'd heard them play before. And so their long driveway was filled with cars. So I'm like, I'm just going to drive out. I'm just going to drive over the lawn. I'm just going to drive over Mitt Romney's lawn, okay? I'm just going to drive over his lawn. How bad can it be? I get my buddy Brad, my bass player. I say, okay, you just go out and make sure I'm all clear. He's like, okay, keep going. Now, mind you, the grass is super high, so it's hard to tell. Keep going, keep going, keep going. My car, the oil pan had hit a rock. And like the dead buffalo in Dances with Wolves, a movie which I don't suggest you watch compared to Romance, although does have its strengths. Like a dead buffalo in a field, my Ford Windstar was just completely stopped and completely dead in the middle of Mitt Romney's lawn. And so I had to go in and explain the story to Mitt Romney. He was very pleasant, never got upset, called AAA, got my tow truck, never asked for anything, never got mad, never got upset. So I don't know what kind of politician he would be, okay? I don't agree with a lot of his policies. He's probably one of the smartest and best Republicans, in my opinion, that there's been in our country. So I don't think a Romney presidency would be a complete disaster. I don't know, who knows? But I will tell you this, he's a good guy. I mean, you can't fake that. You can't fake some punk kid crashing his car in your... I know if my son had a friend who crashed their car in our yard, I mean, I guess I'd be nice about it, but I'd probably be a little pissed, you know? Okay. So what's cool is there's like a drum outro to the previous song that leads pretty directly into the next song, Auto Anon. And in general, I'd say his vocal styles remind me a lot of the Postal Service and Sunny Day Real Estate kind of all the way throughout here. That kind of cool early 2000s, late 90s sound. Here, though, what's cool is the same keyboard sound that he used previously, the one that I described as the Simply Having a Wonderful Christmas Time Paul McCartney sound, is continued here. And that's where I love the feeling of it really being an album, a cohesive album with a real feeling of songs leading in one to the next. Much more automated, electronic feeling, kind of repeated echoing vocals all over the place in all the ears. Next song, Escalator, has these cool chugging synthesizers. This whole back half of the album is much less guitar-based, a lot more piano or keyboard-based, but this is a nice break from a guitar. It actually sounds a little bit Mickey Mouse. It sounds like an Escalator, almost EDM influences. And this song is less about lyrics and more about feeling, more about atmosphere. And the lyrics are, I mean, he sings them, and he sings them in that kind of Postal Service sounding voice. But these lyrics are basically Radiohead lyrics. I'm singing them like Tom York. Actually, I'm not going to sing them. I just abort mission. I'm halfway dissolved. I'm half there, more than a phantom, but less than a man, haunting her halls like dust. I'm halfway surprised at the touch of her hand. These are great lyrics. That's a great lyric. I'm halfway surprised at the touch of her hand. Halfway? Goddamn. Ritt Momney is a great band. Did you know I performed a concert for Mitt Romney? So here's another thing about Mitt Romney and the Mormon church in Belmont, Massachusetts. They had a church there, a small church, but they had a church. My backyard actually had little woods behind it, and I was able to walk to the church through just maybe two other people's property. And the Mormons have a tradition of something called Super Saturday, which I think is a very good tradition. They get all young people together, they have concerts. And so we played multiple Super Saturday concerts at the Mormon church, not knowing, I didn't even really know what a Mormon was at the time. I mean, I didn't know what a Catholic was. I just didn't understand anything about religion, you know? So I'm, you know, to us it was just a gig at a church. But I now realize that Mitt Romney was there, and also Eliza Dushku from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So we played to some pretty big people. Eventually, they would build a temple in our backyard, like one of the big churches. There's only a few of them in the world. Like no one can go in them, and my whole neighborhood like got scandalized and upset, and they were trying to stop it. I personally never saw any problem with it. I have a lot of faith. I don't talk about this on the channel. I have a lot of faith in Jesus Christ, but I have zero faith in any form of Christianity at all. So to me, just another church. Just doesn't matter. It's a church. It's kind of interesting looking. There's a big angel on the top, Angel Maroney. But it's very strange because in a certain extent, it feels, and probably is the case, that Mitt Romney was sent to my town to help terraform it so that it would be perfectly ready to become essentially Salt Lake City East. I don't know if it's become that way. I live in New York now. Western New York. Next song is called Screw Tape. Gorgeous singing voice, almost like Jeff Buckley-esque, which is a pretty high compliment. Piano is like the first time really hearing piano since the first song, and it's just gorgeous the way it's going. His voice is just really showing off here, where he's been pretty minimalist in the rest of the album. He's really showing off here. More great lyrics. I could use a good dream tonight, or at least just some sleep. It's a very moving song. I felt like I wasn't listening to it for the most part in the right, because I listened to this a couple of times while I was at the gym, at the YMCA. Speaking of Christianity, I was at the YMCA, exercising, and I think this would be much better like alone in your room, because just the emotional content of this song, like these horn sounds come in and they build on top of this increasingly emotional voice. Dress Song is the last song, more piano led. Again, there's a real sweep and scope to this album, this sort of like intro and then guitar work and then kind of keyboard work and then piano, these dominant instruments. More great lyrics. The audacity of the sun going down on days like this, on days like these, but I don't see it like that. I just see the blue turning to pink. Great way to describe a child seeing a sunset. And he talks about the feeling of getting smaller as you age, losing the parts that you used to care about. And it's pretty dark, and I'd say there really is this tangible sense of loss. I think if I were a 24-year-old, like when I was 24, that was probably the lowest point in my life, and I felt like I was losing all this innocence, and I felt like I was losing all this like idealism and joy, and I think this album is a really good connection to that. All the sort of all these keyboards and bloops and beeps come in to add little elements to the production, and then ends with almost a mantra talking about how he's getting better and better, a sort of hopeful mantra that he probably doesn't believe. So that's the album. Now you're wondering, let's get back to my endless Mitt Romney stories, and here's my final one. I never saw him again after I crashed my car on his front lawn. I graduated, and his son was a year younger than me. His son went to the private school, I went to the public school anyway. But when I applied for the job at the school that I now teach at, that I don't represent, but where I teach, I picked up that the chair of the department was fairly politically conservative, okay? And if you're an academic and you're politically conservative, especially in the humanities, especially in foreign language, it's not easy, okay? There's not a lot of them out there, right? There's something about being in the humanities and understanding the scope of human existence that precludes you from holding conservative political beliefs. That's just the case. Like, the more you know, the more you understand. I think the less you can realistically be a card-carrying Republican. That said, I've known a lot of great Republicans in my life, like Mitt Romney. And I knew that I was doing okay in the interviews, and it's really hard to get a job as a French professor. Extremely hard, super hard, insanely hard. So I got, 10 interviews and I applied to 50 positions, but this is my only real campus visit. And I knew when I had lunch with her, if I could slip in the Romney story, I could give the impression as an ally. Because I could tell these stories honestly, and she might think, oh, wow, another Republican French teacher. I never thought I'd find one. So I was able to tell that story, and that might have helped to sway my way or win good favor because, So there you go. And if I didn't get that job, I never would have been a French professor. I probably would have taken some other job where I was working in the French language. I would have been too busy. My job would have been crazy. I would never have started this channel. So thank you, Mitt Romney, for leading me to Ritt Momney. All right. Till next time, for all the members of Millhouse, there's the camera.